So what I'd like to do today for this video is explain how the thesis statement functions in relationship to paper structure. These two things, when put together, will actually make your papers far easier to write. It removes all the mystery of what comes next, what are you supposed to do in the paper. And so I'm going to outline how this works and how the thesis statement kind of functions teleologically, as we'd say. It gives telos, or purpose, to your paper. Now remember, the thesis statement is basically this, right? We have our data, we have our claim, and then we have whatever topics, okay? So remember back to the middle example, Aristotle, the greatest thinker of all time, how and why, systems of thought, systems of logic, and Plato's best student with, right, our backing topic here. So when we have this model in place, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to think of the paper in these ways. There are basically 5 components in the main structure of your paper that I want everybody to borrow from. Now the structure I'm actually using here comes from a 2,000-year-old text by a fellow named Quintilian, who was a Roman orator and rhetorician. And Quintilian actually uses this structure for speeches. I've modified it a little bit here to fit with modern essays, but it works quite well. Now, in the opening paragraph. Now this is called a pilcrow. This just means paragraph. Okay, it's a symbol for paragraph. In the opening paragraph, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to provide a hook. Okay, a hook for our purposes is going to always be a quote. Okay, from somebody. So the hook is an opening quote. Okay, that then relates to your thesis statement. You have the hook. Then you have the quote, you have the quote as a hook. You have a couple connecting sentences, okay, that are going to kind of bring this quote toward your thesis, okay. So that's the opening paragraph, okay. Now the thesis, remember, is data, claim, topic, okay. So that's our thesis. Aristotle, greatest thinker, etc., etc., etc. Okay. Now in the context paragraph, which is number 2, what I want you to think of here, this is focused on the data, okay? Whatever you are writing about, okay? This is to give context for the reader to understand what you're doing, why it seems important. So if I'm doing Aristotle, okay, I can do many things. I could do his biography. I could do a kind of historical aspect of Athens at the time. We could talk about the Greek intellectual explosion, okay? There are all kinds of different things. Now this is all focused on the data. I'm not focusing on interpreting. I'm not using any of my topics yet, okay? It's just to give context to whatever I'm writing about, okay? If I'm writing about apples and oranges, here I would talk about qualities of apples and oranges, right? It doesn't really matter, so long as your context paragraph is focused on the data. Now, next, what we're going to look at so the part we're looking at next, right after the context paragraph, these are your body paragraphs, okay? These are the body paragraphs. Now, here's what I want you to see how this functions. Now, remember, here's our data, here's our claim, here are our topics, okay? Aristotle, greatest thinker, here, reason, okay? In the body paragraphs, this is why this becomes really important to map out your thesis statement. Here's how it looks. You have one paragraph here, data, claim, topic. That's just one paragraph. Here I'm focusing only on Aristotle, greatest thinker of all time, because of this topic. He invented systems or categories of thought that we still use today. Okay? Then my next paragraph focuses on my next topic. Okay? This helps you to remember that you have to stay focused on Aristotle and your interpretation through this one point, okay? Because sometimes in students' papers, they'll have a tendency to just kind of veer off and go off in weird tangents, okay? They get excited about writing or whatever, or the idea that they're trying to share, and all of a sudden they're not talking about Aristotle anymore, they're off onto some other philosopher or whatever. So this helps you to stay focused, okay? So our next paragraph, data, claim, and then we have gamma, okay? So this is itself another paragraph, okay? Aristotle, greatest thinker of all time because of the context of being Plato's best student. Remember, this one required a backing topic. Oops. This one required a backing topic, okay? So here in our next paragraph, what we're going to have to do, data, claim, and then delta, and then this is our new paragraph, okay? And then we talk about the intellectual power of Plato and why being his best student in context, okay, could make Aristotle plausibly the greatest mind of all time. Now the next one can get a little confusing. The next paragraph, or the next part of the structure, because students ask me a lot about this overall. I usually use a Latin term for it for this video because I want to make it as simple as possible. I would say that this is, we'll just call it the compare and contrast paragraph, okay? Normally Quintilian calls it the refutatio, and what you can do here is think of it like this. The comparison and contrast is based solely on the claim, okay? You want to focus on the claim, so smartest of all time. Well, let's think of a compare and contrast. Who else could be the greatest mind of all time? There are many, many people, and we might say something like Isaac Newton, okay? This is going to be a contrast type of paragraph, okay? So I'm going to contrast Newton with Aristotle. Now, the way that I want you to think about this is that when you're comparing or contrasting, okay, you have to be careful to steer, right, your example here back towards your claim, okay, back toward the data. So you could say something like Isaac Newton is considered one of the greatest minds of all time. His advances in mathematics helped revolutionize our understanding of celestial mechanics. However, without Aristotle's influence, Newton's mathematics and science could never have existed. You see, I'm saying this. Newton was smart, but without Aristotle, we could not have Isaac Newton. Okay, so that would be a contrasting type of paragraph. Okay, the comparison type is simply where you you take somebody who would agree with you. So you have Thomas Aquinas, okay, a very famous Catholic philosopher, theologian. Thomas Aquinas tried to integrate Aristotle's philosophy into Catholic thinking. And if you've read Aristotle, you'll know it doesn't really fit all that well. He doesn't seem to be really, super religious. He's slightly religious, but not all that much, and certainly not Christian. Okay, so Aquinas considered Aristotle, as many would call him, the philosopher. That's what people call him, capital P, the philosopher. Okay, so Aquinas had such great respect for Aristotle that he just called him the philosopher. Now, that's a comparison type of paragraph, because you're saying, well, I think Aristotle's the greatest, so does Thomas Aquinas, and he's super famous and super smart. Okay, so that is a comparison contrast. Now, I do require that all of your papers have these elements in it. If you don't have a context paragraph, it's going to hurt your grade. If you don't have a comparison contrast paragraph, it's going to hurt your grade. So I want you to think of them in these ways, please. Okay, so comparison contrast. Either they agree or disagree with your claim in relationship to the data. Okay. Now, in the conclusion, I will put online a link to a basic outline for the conclusion paragraph. In essence, you want to do two things. You want to restate your thesis in different words. Don't cut and paste it, okay, or copy and paste, but restate it in different words. Okay, that helps to kind of tie the paper together. It helps to remind the reader exactly what you're doing. And it helps to just kind of remind you what you've been doing throughout the paper. Now, one quick thing: if your restated thesis is better than your original one, okay, if it's clearer, if it has just better phrasing, cut and paste this and replace it with the first one. So switch the two. Switch the first one to the last one. This restated thesis, okay, helps you to figure out and make sure that you've covered all the topics that you want to do. And then, you can be kind of general, okay? You can be kind of general in the language here because you're trying to basically summarize your whole paper. So therefore, you can be relatively general here, although I would be cautious to say don't be too general. So the other rule for the conclusion is no new information, no new quotes, okay? No new topics, no new authors, no new ideas, nothing new. You're simply restating everything that has come before, and that's all you need to do. So restate your thesis. You can be kind of general here, and then you want to have a tonal closing or a tonal closure. Okay, the last sentence should try to close the essay tonally in some way. It would sound something like, although nobody can say for certain who the greatest mind of all time was, predominantly through his influence and through his continuing engagement in philosophical and intellectual pursuits, Aristotle could be a likely candidate. You see, that has a kind of tonal closing to it that the reader is going to pick up on. Okay? Now, directly after this, directly after your tonal closure, and this is going to be the subject of a separate lecture, you must have your work cited. Okay? So the work cited, that's the MLA designation, the reference list, if we're doing APA. So these must follow directly after your conclusion paragraph. If your paper does not have a work cited or it does not have a reference list, it is considered plagiarism, accidental or otherwise, and it will not be graded. If not, it'll be failed outright. Okay? So do not forget the works cited list, and we're going to talk about how that's formatted later. But this concludes the general outline for the paper structure. So I want you to follow this to a T. Okay? If you have any questions, you're always free to ask.